I'm saying Deion Sanders, and here's why, Ari. Here's why. Um, Deion Sanders went to Colorado, and obviously that program was not ready to win. I don't think Deion Sanders is a builder. I think he's a guy that you inject into the middle of the SEC, let him hire a really good offensive and defensive coordinator, and just let him go try to
Hire them in the
join.
middle of the year. Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean in the offseason, but you know what I mean. Like just
Yeah, demote him like they did with Sean Lewis. But yeah,
let him try to get into Group A because I think Texas A&M's problem hasn't been talent, but I think if you're ever going to get into Group A, right? If you're ever going to join the Ohio States and the Alabamas and Georgias of the world, you need somebody who can take you there and just take some of their players away from them. And I think Deion, in a fully built tank like Texas A&M is, can actually go to war with these guys and win because he is the kind of guy who can recruit and convince players not to go to Alabama in Georgia if he was in a position like Texas A&M. He can't do that at Colorado. Not everybody's going to buy into going out there and playing at Colorado. Transfers aren't going to do it either. They don't want to go, play for a program that hasn't won in a long time. But you take them to Texas A&M and you tell them, hey, you're going to have offensive linemen here, and you're going to have really good defensive linemen, and you're going to compete in the best conference in the world, then I think you can give yourself a fighting chance. And I think ultimately, like Texas A&M hiring Mike Elko and this other guy from UTSA might work out, and that might be what they ultimately do. But if I'm Texas A&M and I want to win national championships, then I got to go out there and get a guy who I think could bring in the kind of players that will lead you to a national championship.
I understand your thought process here, but I've got two questions I want to ask you guys. Mm-hmm. One, because I think it would be too volatile. Like for a team that's paying or a program that's paying 77 or whatever $1 million to make somebody go away, you feel like whatever money you spend in order to do this, because it's going to probably cost them 120 million between the staff, the buyout, and whatever they have to pay the people who come in to replace that staff. Do you want to put yourself in a position where you might be back to square one in 2 years if things are bad? Like I think Deion has done a tremendous job at Colorado, and because a part of it was so bad, the only direction it was that it could go up because he brought a lot of, eyeballs and some exciting players that Colorado had no chance of getting before. Like I understand that, the 4 wins that they have so far is a huge increase. I think that is a marketably different job or goal than it would be to go to a place that already has a loaded roster and make it better or maintain it. And second of all, are we sure he's there long term? And then third of all, are we sure that we are cool with his decision making as a program builder? Like I think that there are, like, for as exciting and like fun as that would be, and Manny, you're right, like I think that it would infuse and inject more energy into that program. I don't know if the right combination for that job would be, well, we've stunk for 100 years and we're trying to figure out why. Let's go get the biggest wild card we can possibly get. Like I think that that's where they've gone wrong. I think that they've swung too hard for the fences and gotten somebody that has a name or is flashy or makes you excited, when really all they need is a really good football coach. And I don't know if I think yet that Deion Sanders is just a really good football coach. I think he's exciting. I think he's a rock star. I think he makes people want to play for him. I think he has funny quotes in press conferences. I think that he made apparel look better at Colorado, like their uniforms and their hoodies look cool and stuff. But like, is that who you think is most likely to line up a team on the field and beat Kirby Smart or Nick Saban? Like, I don't know if I would think that. So that's the only thing that gives me pause. Now, also, it has to be said, does Deion Sanders fit culturally in College Station? Like,
probably not.
I just don't know if he would, A, like it there, or if B, the people who root for the team would like his style. So, like, I think that it is exciting, and I'm sure that people would like it or be excited about it if it were to happen. I also think the potential of it exploding in the most unbelievably gruesome way is like a high likelihood. And I don't know if that's a chance that Texas A&M should be willing to take while they're paying Jimbo Fisher $13,000 before breakfast every day for the next 27 years. Like, I don't know. That's my thought. Is your next coach at Texas A&M, is the prereq to have to maintain the ability to recruit at that level or not? Because one last thing too. Deion's recruiting class at Colorado, and granted, they don't have the NIL, they don't have the geography, and they don't have the brand recognition, but they currently rank number 63 overall nationally in the 247 Sport Composite ranking. And I know that he makes splashes at the end, and they might get a guy or two that we're not anticipating, but we're talking about a class that's probably going to finish somewhere in the 30s if things go well. Are we sure that he's a great high school football recruiter? Because he has never done it before. He has had a few flips. Like Carmani McLean was exciting, and Travis Hunter, certainly was great. Is he a top to bottom great recruiter that's going to sign diamond in the rough, low end 4-star offensive guards from Houston? Or is he going to be the flashy skill position players that want to have a bunch of social media followers? Not that that's bad, but you need to build a football team. You don't need to flip 4 guys at the end of every cycle and make news. You need to build a solid roster from top to bottom. I'm going to shut up now.
All right. You said a lot there, and they were all really good points, and it's hard to argue against them, but I am going to argue against it. Here's what I'm going to say. Number one, I don't think Deion is in a position in Colorado where he can recruit. He had to obviously go out and get the transfer portal players to make even that roster that was 1 or 2 wins the last couple of years, close to 500. Right. So he had to bring in older players. That was his approach early on. That was sort of Mike Norvell's approach early on at Florida State. And then a couple of years later, now he's got the number 2, number 3 recruiting class in the country because those transfers helped get him to a point where they can now recruit. So I think Deion, that's sort of the situation he's at in Colorado. At Texas A&M, you mentioned it. He'd have NIL up the wazoo. He'd be coaching in the SEC. He'd be in a state that has more talent than any other state in the country. So for all those reasons, I think he could definitely continue what's happened at Texas A&M in terms of accumulating talent. I think he would take it to a different level. The reason I want Deion is I look at Georgia and I look at Alabama, who have won, basically all the national championships except for one, right? When Ohio State won here in the last whatever amount of years it was, and whenever Dabo had things together, Clemson, those 3 seasons. I look at those 2 SEC programs and I say, well, what advantages do they have? One, all the best players in the country want to play for them all the time. So they always have the best, most talented rosters. And 2, they've got great coaching, right? Like they have just about every advantage. So to me, you put a wild card like Deion in there, now guys like Jalen Milroe and Jaden Daniels and guys that are obviously the difference makers in college football today. The next Shedeur Sanders, right? He doesn't have to count on Shedeur to go in there and do it. He can get the next, Jaden Daniels, whoever it is. And to me, he attracts those guys. They don't go to Alabama. They don't go to Georgia. They go play for Deion. And I think that's part of the reason why Alabama and Georgia have continued to dominate, because there hasn't been anybody who's come close to rivaling them on the recruiting trail. Like we know this. We sit here, we look at the recruiting rankings. Yes, Texas A&M might be number 5 in the team talent composite. But if you really stack that roster next to Alabama's or Georgia's, who are you taking 9 times out of 10 every Saturday? You're taking the Alabama and the Georgias, right? Like, to me, Deion changes that perspective. He actually has a chance to build the most talented roster in the country and take that advantage away from Nick Saban and take that advantage away from Kirby Smart. So, like, Texas A&M did it once under Jimbo. I think Deion could do that for 4 or 5 straight years if he can get things rolling over there. So, to me, that's why you go out and you get him, and you don't necessarily bring in a Mike Elko or somebody else who is just not going to, necessarily put you in that level or put you into that fight with those 2 programs. Like, to me, if Texas A&M spending $77 million to pay Jimbo to go away, they're clearly willing to go to any lengths to win a championship. So why not continue to go the full way, get the best hire who can really put you on a level with these teams and give you a chance to win a national championship? Because the bottom line is, until you're better than Georgia and Alabama, you're not winning a national championship.
I think my concern with Deion is, let's say they give him this job, right? And when he first got the job at Colorado, we all praised him because he surrounded himself with really smart people, right? Like, he made some really smart hires. And then midway through the season, like, did we ever figure out what happened with Sean Lewis? Like, he just demoted him, for lack of a better term. And I just, that's what scares me about the idea of Deion at A&M, is it's a place that is already a little bit of a pressure cooker. There's so many eyeballs on you. There's so many opinions. There's boosters, what have you. Like, I think it's got to be someone who can sort of manage all of that. And until we get some sort of, and I don't know, maybe I'm too curious about this, but until we get some sort of like solid answers about what happened with Sean Lewis and was there an actual reason for his demotion, or wake up one day and decide I don't want you to be my play caller anymore, that's what would make me a little bit nervous if I was the A&M administration.